Okay, class today. We're looking at 9.7, which is solving quadratics with square roots. With square roots meaning that's going to be how we solve these. We can only use this method when in ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We can only use this when b is equal to 0. It's the only time we can use this. If you notice every problem underneath here, we have our number with x squared, and then we have our constant c, but there's no extra number in the middle. So we just have a and c here. That's how we know we can use this. When we're working with a problem like this, there's three simple steps. First thing is isolate the squared term. Second is square root both sides. Third is make sure you have two answers. This is going to be one of those assignments where you're going to want your iPad calculator handy. Most calculators are going to be able to do the square root button though. So if you don't want to use the one on your iPad, you want to use maybe one on your phone, that should work fine. This first problem, step one's done first. Isolate the squared term. X is squared. I want this by itself on either side. From here, I'm going to square root both sides. When I square root both sides, that means that I'm looking for a number that when I multiply it by itself, I get this. So for example here, x times x would make x squared. So I'm going to start with just x. On this side, 4 times 4 makes 16. However, 4 times 4 equals 16, but so does negative 4 times negative 4. That also equals positive 16. So my final answer here is going to be plus or minus negative 4. So my answer is positive 4 and negative 4, but because it's the same number, 4, I can just put the plus minus in front knowing that it's one of each. This next problem, I need to isolate the squared term. I'm going to do that by adding 7, like I'm solving an equation. I'm going to get x squared is equal to 7. When I square root both sides here, this side's going to be x. This side, when I find the square root of 7, I'm going to give a decimal because 7's not a perfect square. That's totally fine. What you want to do is just make sure that you round. I would round 2 numbers after the decimal, so make it to the 10th. So I would write the answer here because the decimal ends up being 2.645. I would round my answer here to 2.65, and it's also going to be a plus or minus answer. Sorry, that's a little crammed in there. Everything will be a plus or minus answer today if it's the same number. What that means is that if I plugged in this number positive or negative into here, it would cancel out this side and make 0. If I were to plug in positive or negative 4 here for x and multiply it by itself, I would get the positive 16. Next problem, I would start by subtracting 9 because I need to get my isolated squared term. I need to isolate my square term. That's going to make x squared is equal to negative 9. Now here, something important happens that you need to know. This is going to be a no solution answer. The reason it's a no solution answer is I cannot find the square root of a negative. That does not work. In order to make a negative number, I need to have, in multiplication, I need one number to be positive, one number to be negative. There's no net number multiplied by itself that makes a negative answer. If I were to use positive 3 and positive 3, that makes positive 9. If I use negative 3 and negative 3, that also equals positive 9. There's no way for me to do a square root of a negative number. As soon as you put a negative number in this radical symbol, it's a no solution answer. Down here, this next one, if you notice here, I now have a number in front of my x squared. Up here, we didn't have that happen. I still want to treat this like solving an equation, so the first thing I'm going to do is divide both sides by 6. When I do that, I get x squared is equal to 16. So I'm going to get pretty much the exact same problem I had right here. I can actually copy this down here, solve it the same way, square both sides. X is equal to plus or minus 4. You could also write this as x equals positive 4, x is equal to negative 4. It all means the same thing. This is just a quicker way to write it. This next side, when I solve this one, I'm going to start by adding 100 to both sides. I'm going to get 4x squared is equal to 100. divide both sides by 4 to get my x squared by itself. I would get x squared is equal to 25. From here, when I square root both sides, my answer is going to be x is equal to plus or minus 5. Hopefully from here, I have the rest of the paper in focus. I do. Okay, perfect. So, moving on to these problems, a couple of these are going to be more multi-step. This next one, I'm going to start by solving the same way. Subtract 12. 3x squared is equal to 39. Divide by 3, divide by 3. So I'm going to get x squared is equal to 13. I can get a decimal answer, that's fine. When I put this into my calculator, I'm getting 3.605. So I would round this up and have this be x is equal to plus or minus 3.61. This next one, add 25 to both sides. 9x squared is equal to 25. From here, when I divide both sides, I would not put this into your calculator right away. If you notice, if I keep this as this fraction, I'm going to get x squared is equal to 25 over 9. Both 25 and 9 are perfect squares, so I don't need to worry from here about actually making this a decimal number. I can leave this the way that it is. If I find the square root of both sides here, I'm going to get x is equal to plus or minus 25 is a perfect square of 5, 9 is a perfect square of 3. I can just leave my answer as this improper fraction by simplifying it. If you would prefer to make that a decimal number, that's totally fine. These last two problems that say solve by square roots, if you notice these look a little bit different. We have parentheses now. What we want to do is we want to get rid of this squared symbol here by starting by square rooting both sides. When I do that, I can get rid of this squared. So this just becomes x minus 8 is equal to, if I find the square root of 9, that's plus or minus 3. We haven't had this come up before where we have an equation where we have a plus and a minus. The easiest way to think about solving this is to create two separate problems. X minus 8 is equal to positive 3, or x minus 8 is equal to negative 3. When I add 8 to both sides, I'm going to get two different number answers. On one of these, I'm going to get x is equal to 11, or x is going to be equal to 5. Both of these are going to be my answer. Because I have this expression inside of the parentheses, I'm going to get two different numbers for my answer. Up top, we only got one number. This one, same thing. I'm going to start by square rooting both sides. 2x minus 1 is equal to plus or minus 7. I'd write that as 2x minus 1 is equal to positive 7, or 2x minus 1 is equal to negative 7. When I go through and solve this side, plus 1, and this side too, plus 1, 2x is equal to 8. 2x is equal to negative 6. Sorry, that's an 8. I'm going to get a final answer of x equals 4 when I divide, or x is equal to negative